Thank you, Sarah, and good day, conference. I'm speaking on this particular motion and strongly in favour of it. And I'm going to try and keep my comments to two particular sections of it. Lines 46 and 47 in the substantive motion and amendment number 1 as proposed. As was said, I'm a councillor. I work as a member of council at Wycombe District Council. And recently we have set up and finished a task and finish group reporting to our scrutiny committee into disability. It produced 26 recommendations. They all went through a cabinet in which predominantly a Conservative controlled council. They've all been accepted because we operated cross-party. And I set my council a challenge. And the challenge I set them was, can we become the best council for disabilities in Britain? This motion is part of the way in which Liberal Democrats think. I want to see my council operating towards it. I'd like to give those of you who are sitting councillors at the moment, and those of you who can influence that, a little bit of guidance towards this. Lines 46 and 47 talk about removing barriers to employment, to transport, and to participation. We have a tool to be able to do this, fellow delegates. The National Policy Planning Framework has 2 paragraphs within it, 35 and 50, which have very specific mentions of disability. Paragraph 35 talks about transport. It says that transport should consider the needs of people with disabilities in all its modes. Let's get that into your local council's core strategy and local plan. Let's make it so that nothing can happen in transport which does not mention disability. Paragraph 50 talks about housing. It talks about creating a mixed stock of housing, and it creates stock which should consider people with disabilities. It's part of what's available. Let's get it into statutory legislation for our local councils. If we can do that, then the ability of disabled people to live more equal and successful lives, to be able to be in a position where they are treated in exactly the same way as the able, it becomes better and more substantial. It can be done. I've already told our planning department we want it to be in there. There is support in my council for that. I would hope that many other Liberal Democrats will be able to do that as well. So there's a little bit of guidance. What about the motion amendment number 1? Amendment number 1 is excellent. It's excellent because it sets what I think are the heart of Liberal Democrat values, that we treat everybody equally. Equality of opportunity is at the heart of what we believe. This motion and this particular amendment allows that to do that. And in the same way as I set a challenge for my council on disabilities, I think we can set a challenge for ourselves as Liberal Democrats. I think that what we should have is the equivalent at social level of what we agree at a military level. We have a military covenant. We rightly believe that those people who serve our country have the right to expect the support of the state when they no longer do so. I think as Liberal Democrats we should have a social covenant, a covenant which says that we support everybody who is in social need. Those people who work not just in the disability services, those people who are carers, those people who work in public services, those people who give up their lives and give their time and don't expect financial profit. If we can do that, fellow delegates, that's a fantastic leap forward, and I hope we do. Thank you.
Thank you. Will Joy Rosensteel please stand by? And I now call Jill Allen King, OBE, who is now coming to the stage. And Jill, I've noted that you need a verbal warning of 1 minute to go, so I will make sure I do that.
Right, thank you very much. Well, I've got quite a bit of experience on this subject because for the past 20 years I've been a member of the Appeal Service, where obviously I've heard and met thousands of people with all kinds of disabilities, and currently we're looking at cases going back from 2009 to 2011. That's the state of the DWP at the moment. So can you see what a mess they're going to be in next year when they stop DLA and bring in PIP? I've also been on the consultation meetings, not all of them, but some of them, and one of the previous speakers said they're not going to take into account people with hidden disabilities. Well, I spent an hour and a half with the top civil servant trying to convince him that even though I had been totally blind for 48 years, I'm still totally blind and I still need help from other people. He thought that because I'd been blind for all that time, I could cope. And then he said, but you've got your guide dog. I said, yes, but she's illiterate. She can't. She can't read, write or talk. She doesn't do anything for me indoors except cause a hazard with all her toys that she leaves laying around. But I'm just so angry. It took years for us to get blind people included in the Disability Living Allowance when it first came in. And I was appointed and sat on the board for 6 years on the DLA board. I was the only blind person on it. There were 6 people using wheelchairs. I think there was somebody with a hearing defect, but nobody with mental or learning difficulties on that board. And when I left, I was not replaced by another blind person. And so not only are we fighting, really fighting, to keep every disabled person now receiving those benefits, but those people that are totally blind, that have severe mental issues, and I just don't know what's going to happen. I really don't. And for 20% to be cut, it's going to be dreadful, it really is. And any of your MPs, I expect there's none left in here now, but the regulations will be going through Parliament in the autumn, and you can vote against those regulations, and I urge you to do that. Otherwise, and one very important issue, when the letters go out to 2.2 million people to tell them that the DLA is stopping, if they haven't replied within 4 weeks, that DLA benefit is going to be stopped, automatically stopped. We've tried to get it extended to 8 weeks or 10 weeks, but it's not. Now, the centres...
You've got 1 minute left. Okay.
Right, very quickly. The centres are not all fully accessible, and can I just, public awareness, please be aware of the difficulties that we all have in our streets with the new shared spaces that we've got, which are no-go areas, and also the silent electric vehicles that are being brought in that we can't hear them coming, and cycling being allowed to ride on pavements. All these issues make life very, very difficult, not just for blind people, but for all vulnerable pedestrians in our society. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. Will Julia McLean please stand by? And I now call Joy Rosensteel from Cambridge.
Thank you, Chair. I'm here to support the motion. Part of the reason I want to support the motion is because earlier this year I had a telephone call from a party member who's been a member since the mid-1980s to tell me that they were resigning. And the reason they were resigning was because what they perceived to be the coalition government's policies on work capability and their fears what this would do. And I'm keen that we do send out a message that Liberal Democrats do have reservations about work capability, and in particular the way in which the system is currently being administered by Atos. I think we do need to be concerned that a third of the people are going to appeal, some of whom have quite severe disabilities and for whom even the ATOS assessors, in one case, have said that they're not fit to work in the near future. The other group that I want to draw attention to are people with Asperger's syndrome and autistic spectrum disorders. Tragically, only 15% of people with Asperger's syndrome are in full-time employment. And even amongst those who graduate, the rate of graduate unemployment is 25%, a percentage which is far higher for groups than amongst other groups with people with disabilities. People with Asperger's syndrome often make excellent employees, but they do face barriers both with application forms, interview, and persuading the employers that they would make good employees. I very much welcome the National Autistic Society's campaign called the Undiscovered Workforce, and I hope that Liberal Democrat MPs will give support to this campaign and do what they can to persuade the Job Centre, local authorities, and indeed employers to come to understand some of the difficulties and barriers that they face. I'm not opposed to disabled people being encouraged to go out to work. What I want, though, is for them that the barriers to be broken down so that they can indeed achieve full employment. And I particularly, as I said, highlight the difficulties that people with Asperger's syndrome face. I hope that this will be passed and maybe even reassure my former member that he should indeed become a member again and join in the Liberal Democrat fight to ensure that our voice is heard within the coalition government.